Oscar Piastri had a weird and confusing race at Silverstone. The things he asked his team to do made everyone in the F1 world scratch their heads. Obviously, he's mad about getting a 10-second penalty for breaking a safety car rule. But honestly, that was the smallest punishment he could have gotten for what he did. But is Piastri starting to crack under pressure now that Norris is doing really well? And will the British driver be able to use this to help himself? The British Grand Prix was exactly what you'd expect in Great Britain with their crazy weather. The conditions kept changing. They started on special rain tires, then it rained really hard, and then they finished the race on dry tires. The whole race kept us on the edge of our seats watching, but nothing was crazier than what happened when the race restarted on lap 18 at this point. Hülkenberg was out after he crashed into Antonelli's back end because he couldn't see him through all the rain spray. And Piastri, who took first place very early in the race and looked like he'd never give it up, had to build up his lead again ahead of Verstappen and Norris. But then the Aussie did something really strange. When the flashing lights turned off, he hit the gas pedal and then started braking in a really weird way. Not only did Verstappen almost crash because Piastri's restart moves were confusing, but he lost focus and ended up spinning when Piastri decided to restart for real. I'm not saying Oscar caused Max's mistake, but it definitely messed with the four-time world champion's head. Either way, everyone knew Piastri was going to get punished for what he did. After looking at it quickly, the FIA decided to give the Aussie a 10-second penalty. Since Norris was about 3 to 5 seconds behind him, this basically meant Oscar would have to settle for another second-place finish. Looking at all the dust that Norris has left behind him in recent races, but after the last pit stop, when the driver put on dry tires and Piastri took his penalty, Oscar said something really controversial to his race engineer. I don't think that penalty was very fair. I mean, I know it's a big ask, but if you don't, I think it was fair either. I think we should swap positions back and then race each other. Now, let's break down exactly what Oscar was asking his team to do. He got a penalty because of his own actions. Neither Norris nor McLaren had anything to do with his decision to brake really hard after pushing the brake pedal to the max. He got penalized for it. The penalty could have easily been a stop-and-go, which would have hurt him way more than the 10-second penalty he had to take during his pit stop. And after that, the race went exactly like you would have expected. Piastri lost the lead to Norris. Then he asked for them to switch positions. At this point, Norris was more than 5 seconds ahead of him, and there were only about 5 laps left to race. Picture this. The British driver on the British team is leading the British Grand Prix, and he already said that winning at Silverstone is the biggest dream of his career. How are you going to get on the radio and tell him that because Piastri and the team thought the penalty wasn't fair? They're going to swap positions and then have to race each other for the win. I don't think that's how things work, and the papaya rules that Oscar tried to use here just don't apply to this situation. After the race, Piastri was really angry and said he didn't do anything different from his previous laps behind the safety car, but the computer data that shows exactly what happened proves he did something wrong. He went from 218 km per hour down to 52 km per hour, and by pressing the brakes with 60 psi of pressure, Piastri did one of the most crazy and dangerous braking moves possible on the straight part after turn 14 and before turn 15. Not only did he get a 10-time penalty, but the Aussie also got 2 penalty points added to his super license. With all this in mind, I'm still confused about how Piastri asked what he asked and how he thought such a thing could happen during Norris's home race. At the end of the day, he might have lost a lot of respect, not just from his team, but also from McLaren fans. We might have expected this kind of request from Norris if the situation was flipped, but never from Piastri. But Oscar has shown that he might not be as perfect as we thought he was, and now that his lead in the Drivers' Championship is only 8 points, he has a much harder job ahead of him. When talking about the penalty and how it ruined his race, Piastri said, "I'm not going to say much. I'll get myself in trouble. Apparently you're not allowed to brake behind the safety car anymore. I did it for 5 laps before this, whatever. I'm not going to say too much, but the rules are very clear, and the FIA's guidelines say that this kind of driving deserves a proper penalty. According to the rulebook, we need to listen to what Article 55.15 says. It says that Article 55.15 of the FIA sporting rules required car 81 to drive at a speed that didn't involve any crazy braking or any other move that might put other drivers in danger from the moment the lights on the safety car were turned off. What car 81 did was clearly breaking that rule. Following the penalty guidelines, we gave car 81 a 10-second time penalty. So, what happens next for Piastri and McLaren? There's no doubt that the 2 main guys fighting for the championship are both drivers from the orange and black team, and I don't think anyone else gets close to them. Verstappen's car just isn't good enough right now for a podium finish, let alone fighting with the McLarens up front. We saw Ferrari take a huge step forward here at Silverstone, and they could be a big threat for Max's 3rd place, since he can't always hope and bet that Russell will have a terrible race like he did this Sunday. But McLaren has shown over and over that the track conditions don't bother them at all, whether it's dry, wet, changing weather, or those in-between conditions. They're here to dominate, and they've shown loud and clear that both championships are theirs to win. The bigger question, though, is whether Norris and Piastri can survive racing against each other. Lando has been in great form after his mistake in Montreal and has won the last 2 races, with Piastri not being able to keep up with or pass his teammate, like he did earlier this season and last year. This clearly shows that the MCL39 car is really good with both drivers, and we can't bet on just one of them winning because everything seems so close. And this is where Norris needs to shine. He's been the one who gets criticized for cracking under pressure and not being able to perform when it matters most. The British driver made a lot of mistakes last year when he was the main guy fighting for the title against Verstappen. But this season, even more pressure fell on his shoulders because of his teammate. The hardest driver to beat is the one sitting right next to you in the garage. And now that Lando has been doing really well in the last few races, the momentum has switched to the British driver's side. Of course, the season for these two is far from over. Norris and Piastri are now the only drivers who can make the competition interesting, since we've seen that Verstappen and Red Bull might be smart to focus on 2026 a little early. That's if Max decides to stay with Red Bull after all the problems they've caused him with the RB21 car. As for the McLarens, the decision is pretty simple. You just let your drivers race out there and see who's better without giving any team orders. Exactly, like you did at Silverstone. Maybe Piastri thought his idea was worth sharing and that the team would have this crazy idea of letting them race after Norris got ahead with a 5-second advantage. Maybe he was thinking back to the 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix, but back then, McLaren messed up by putting the wrong strategy on him. Now, when there was a big question about whether the track was good enough to start on dry tires, a risk that was taken by Leclerc, Russell and Hülkenberg, McLaren stuck with their original plan, and that turned out to be like winning the lottery. For them, it goes without saying that Spain and Hungary will be really important for both Piastri and Norris, because the championship lead is very close, and we should expect it to swing back and forth. And when racing is this close, we need to think about what might happen. The last thing McLaren wants is a repeat of what happened to Mercedes in Barcelona in 2016, something that seems like it's already starting to happen. But Piastri will definitely be a different driver in the next race, as he'll turn his anger into motivation. A perfect recipe for disaster waiting to happen. With all this in mind, what do you think about the anger that Piastri showed in Silverstone? And more importantly, do you think he has a good point about why the penalty wasn't needed and was unfair? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's showing up on your screen right now.